Emily was sitting in the university library, tucked away at one of the corner tables, completely absorbed in her aerospace engineering books. Her future looked bright, but what truly motivated her was something much closer. Nathan. He was sitting nearby, deep in his anatomy notes, preparing for the long road ahead to becoming a surgeon. Every time she looked at him, Emily felt a mix of admiration and affection. Nathan's humility, intelligence, and determination drew her to him deeply. Unfortunately, Emily's parents didn't see things the same way. Richard and Elizabeth were influential figures in their town's social circles. With a fortune built over decades, they were used to controlling everything around them, including their only daughter's choices. To them, Nathan was nothing more than a young man from a lower class, unworthy of being near Emily. Nathan's family had lost their wealth after a series of bad investments, and he lived on a scholarship that barely covered his expenses. Yet Nathan never complained. He was the kind of person who believed hard work was worth more than any inheritance. One night, while Emily was having dinner with her parents at their family mansion, the subject finally came up. "Emily, we need to talk," Richard said, setting down his wine glass and leaning forward. "We know you've been seeing this boy. Nathan, right?" Emily's heart raced. She knew this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for the intensity in her father's eyes. "Yes, Dad. Nathan's an incredible guy. He has big plans and—" Emily started, but was quickly cut off by her mother, Elizabeth. "Plans?" her mother scoffed. "Plans that don't involve any financial security or a future worthy of our family's legacy. Emily, sweetheart, you need to understand this relationship is unacceptable." Emily felt the ground crumble beneath her. She tried to explain that Nathan's love and character were far more valuable than any fortune, but her parents were immovable. "You're going to end it with him, Emily. It's out of the question for you to continue seeing someone with no future," Richard said coldly. Emily's pain mixed with anger. How could they be so blind? She loved Nathan, and the last thing she would do is leave him because of some shallow prejudice. Taking a deep breath, she looked her father in the eye. "I'm not breaking up with him. I love Nathan, and I believe in our future together. If you can't see that, then there's nothing I can do." The silence that followed was suffocating. Elizabeth stood up from the table, her face flushed with fury, while Richard leaned even closer. "If you insist on this, you'll be on your own. No help from us. No inheritance. Think carefully before throwing everything away for a man who has nothing to offer." Emily felt the tears welling up, but she held them back. With a firm voice, she responded, "I'd rather have nothing than live a life where love and character aren't valued." The decision was made. That night, she left the mansion with just a suitcase and Nathan's support, who promised they would get through anything together. It was the beginning of a new life, built on love, but also full of uncertainty. Emily was aware that challenges would come, but the conviction that she was on the right path gave her strength. Without her parents' financial help, Emily and Nathan moved to a small town where Nathan had secured a full scholarship to continue his medical studies. Emily, with her passion for science, landed an internship at an engineering firm, earning enough to cover her basic expenses while finishing her own studies. The first few months were tough. Both worked long hours and had little time for each other, but the love they shared kept them grounded. Emily had no regrets about her choice, even when the reality of life without the luxury she was used to hit hard. Nathan, on the other hand, became more committed to his dream of becoming a doctor with each passing day, filling her with pride. One night, as they were winding down after a long day of work and study, Emily looked at Nathan, who was exhausted, and reviewing his anatomy notes by the dim light of a lamp. "Nathan, "Do you think I made the right choice?" she asked, in a moment of vulnerability. Nathan stopped what he was doing, set the papers aside, and moved closer to Emily, taking her hand. "I know you did, and I know that no matter what happens, we're going to build something amazing together. You're the bravest woman I've ever known, Emily, and I'm the luckiest man to have you by my side." Nathan's words were like a balm to Emily's heart. She knew the road ahead would be long and full of obstacles, but with him by her side, she was ready to face anything. The decision to stay with Nathan and build a life based on love and dedication, rather than money and status, strengthened her every day. What she didn't know, however, was that destiny still had big surprises and twists in store for their journey. The first year away from wealth and privilege tested Emily and Nathan's resilience. The small town they moved to didn't offer many luxuries, but to them, that simplicity symbolized freedom. Away from the stifling expectations of Emily's parents, they leaned on each other and focused on their goals. Nathan dove into his medical studies with an almost obsessive dedication. His dream of becoming a surgeon drove him to work tirelessly. He held an internship at the local hospital, observing surgeries and soaking up as much knowledge as possible. Despite the lack of financial stability, Nathan stood out. His professors admired his work ethic, and his peers saw a determination in him that few had. Meanwhile, Emily found an internship at a small engineering firm. It wasn't a big company, but the work was challenging and rewarding. She spent hours developing innovative solutions to engineering problems, proving her worth even among more experienced professionals. Every project she completed brought her closer to her dream of becoming a recognized aerospace engineer. The nights were long, and weekends were almost non-existent. Emily and Nathan barely had time to rest. Their days were filled with studying, work, and more studying. But instead of pulling them apart, it brought them closer. They knew they were investing in a bright future, and each small step forward was celebrated as a victory. Even so, Emily occasionally felt the weight of her parents' rejection. There were times when she wondered if she had made the right decision in giving up the security they offered. It was hard not to imagine what her life would be like if she had followed their wishes. One night, after an especially exhausting week, Nathan noticed the distant look on Emily's face as they sat down for dinner at their small kitchen table. "Are you okay?" he asked, taking her hand. "Thinking about your parents?" Emily sighed. No matter how hard she tried to hide it, Nathan always knew what she was feeling. "Sometimes, yeah. Not because of the money, but I wonder if they even think about me. Will I ever get the chance to show them I made the right choice?" Nathan looked into her eyes, his gaze full of compassion. "You're already showing them, Emily. Every step you take, every project you finish, every time you overcome a challenge, you're proving you're so much more than they ever imagined. And one day, they'll realize it." Emily smiled, feeling renewed by Nathan's confidence in her. He always knew how to comfort her, reminding her that no matter what others thought, they were building something powerful together. Over time, Emily began gaining recognition at the small company. Her passion for engineering and desire to create innovative solutions caught the attention of her supervisors. They started giving her more challenging responsibilities. Her talent didn't go unnoticed, and soon she started making important connections in the aerospace field. Then, she received an offer that would change her life. One of the country's largest aerospace engineering companies was looking for young talent for a new project, and Emily's name had been recommended. She found herself in an interview for a position that could propel her career to the next level. The project involved developing new technologies for space travel, something Emily had always dreamed of working on. During the interview, sitting in front of veteran engineers and directors from one of the biggest corporations in the U.S., Emily realized just how much she had grown since leaving her parents' house. The insecure young woman who once depended on her family's approval was now confident, speaking as an equal with some of the biggest names in the industry. Her competence was undeniable, and when the job offer came, Emily knew she was about to take the next big step in her life. Meanwhile, Nathan was also advancing in his career. After years of hard work and dedication, he was accepted into a prestigious surgical residency program. The university hospital he was assigned to was known for producing some of the best surgeons in the country. For Nathan, it was the fulfillment of a dream. He knew his journey was just beginning, but he was certain he was on the right path. They celebrated these achievements together, knowing that even though the road ahead was long, every victory brought them closer to their goals. Emily was now working in a field she admired, surrounded by professionals who respected and valued her contributions. Nathan was on his way to becoming the surgeon he had always dreamed of. Together, they had proven that rejection and hardship wouldn't define them. They were much stronger than that. Though the days of luxury and comfort felt far away, Emily didn't miss them. She knew that, in the end, true value lay in her character, determination, and the faith that kept her going. Everything she and Nathan had accomplished was the result of hard work, and that filled them with pride. What Emily didn't know yet was that while they were thriving, her parents' world was starting to fall apart. The years of constant effort and overcoming challenges had begun to pay off in ways Emily and Nathan never could have imagined. As they both dove deeper into their respective careers, the recognition they had once only dreamed of was now becoming a tangible reality. Nathan, after completing his surgical residency with honors, was invited to work at one of the most prestigious hospitals in New York. His talent for complex surgeries and his compassionate care for patients made him a standout within the medical team. Though still young, he was already receiving invitations to speak at conferences and medical events, where veteran surgeons admired his innovations and techniques. For Nathan, the journey had been tough, but his passion for medicine, along with Emily's unwavering support, had been crucial in getting him this far. Emily, on the other hand, was making just as much progress in the world of aerospace engineering. After being hired by the leading company in the field, she began working on groundbreaking projects that pushed the boundaries of science. Her work stood out not only for its technical precision, but also for the creativity and boldness of her solutions. Gradually, Emily gained the respect of her colleagues and superiors, and before long, she was leading entire teams on large-scale missions. One of these projects involved developing a new propulsion technology for spacecraft aimed at facilitating future missions to Mars. Emily poured herself into the project, knowing this was the kind of work that could define her career. Her passion for space exploration and her unshakable belief in her abilities pushed her forward, and she didn't hesitate to take on the most complex challenges. "We are witnessing one of the brightest minds of the new generation," said the company's director as he introduced her at a conference for engineers and scientists. "Emily Thompson has revolutionized how we think about the future of aerospace engineering." As Emily stepped onto the stage to speak about her discoveries and innovations, she felt a mix of pride and humility. It was surreal to think about how much she had grown since the days when she and Nathan could barely pay their bills. Now she was being recognized publicly, with her name circulating among the biggest scientists and engineers in the country. The specialized press also began to take notice. Articles and interviews with Emily started appearing in engineering and technology magazines, praising her genius and contributions to scientific progress. In one of these interviews, she was asked about her journey of overcoming challenges and what motivated her to keep going despite all the obstacles. I think the most important thing is to believe that, no matter how hard things seem, there's always a greater purpose. For me, faith and the support of those I love have always been key," she answered with a confident smile. As Emily and Nathan rose in their careers, their relationship remained strong. The professional success they were experiencing didn't drive them apart. Instead, every victory was shared and celebrated together. They had built a solid partnership grounded in respect, love, and a common goal: to succeed without losing sight of who they truly were. However, even amidst all this success, Emily still had an empty space in her heart. Though she rarely spoke about it, she felt the absence of her parents in her life. The rejection, though distant in time, still weighed on her soul. She wondered if she would ever have the chance to show them how much she had achieved, to prove that her life choices had been the right ones. Emily wasn't seeking revenge or recognition for her wealth. What she truly wanted was reconciliation, a chance to restore the family bond. As these thoughts lingered in her mind, she and Nathan continued to shine in their respective fields. Together, they were one of the most admired couples in their professional circles. Nathan received awards for his innovative research in surgery, while Emily, with her pioneering spirit, was considered one of the most influential aerospace engineers of the new generation. But behind all this success, something bigger was about to happen. Her parents' lives, Richard and Elizabeth, were taking an unexpected turn. Driven by greed and overconfidence in their investments, Emily's parents began to experience the bitter taste of failure. The fortune they had accumulated over decades, which had defined them so much, was starting to crumble before their eyes. Reckless financial decisions and poorly executed business deals led to mounting losses. What had once been power and influence was now turning into debt and shame. Emily and Nathan had no idea what was happening with her parents, but fate was about to bring them back into their lives. And while Emily and Nathan were reaping the rewards of their hard work and dedication, Richard and Elizabeth's world was falling apart. The irony of the situation was clear. The parents who had dismissed Nathan's potential and Emily's determination were now sinking in the very thing they had valued most: money. While Emily and Nathan continued their professional rise, the situation with her parents took a drastic and irreversible turn. What once seemed like a stable and prosperous life for Richard and Elizabeth had now turned into a storm of losses and failures. The greed that had driven Richard to make risky investments finally caught up with him. He had always been a bold businessman, betting big and reaping the rewards over the years. But the economic landscape shifted, and Richard's overconfidence led him to make reckless decisions. He believed his intuition and track record would save him. But this time, the losses piled up quickly. The beginning of the downfall was subtle. One failed investment, one partnership that didn't go through. But soon, financial problems began multiplying. Richard and Elizabeth, who had always lived surrounded by luxury and status, started feeling the pressure of mounting debt. The family's wealth, built over decades, was unraveling before their eyes. "I can't believe this is happening," Elizabeth said, distressed, as she looked at the financial papers scattered across the table. "We've always been in control. How can we be losing everything like this?" Richard, usually so self-assured, looked exhausted. The weight of his poor decisions was visible on his face. He no longer carried the unshakable confidence he once had. The reality was brutal. They were on the brink of ruin. They tried to keep up appearances as long as they could. They continued attending social events, participating in high society gatherings, but the rumors had already started. People were noticing something was wrong. The family mansion, which once symbolized power and success, now felt like a burden they could no longer bear. The friends who had once admired Richard and Elizabeth began to drift away, and the humiliation of their impending downfall only fueled their pride, preventing them from asking for help. "They're talking about us, Richard," Elizabeth said, her eyes welling with tears. "Everyone knows we're losing everything." Richard's silence was deafening. He had always been the man of action, the one who had a solution for everything. But now there was no escape. The debts had grown to the point that the only solution was to sell what remained of the family's inheritance. It was an emotional devastation for both of them. What had once been a life of abundance had now turned into a desperate race to avoid complete financial collapse. By this point, Emily's parents could hardly face the future without the weight of shame. The financial ruin was accompanied by an even deeper pain: the absence of their daughter. In moments of crisis, the void left by their rejection of Emily became unbearable. Elizabeth, especially, reflected on the decisions they had made years ago. "Maybe if we hadn't pushed Emily away," Elizabeth started, but quickly stopped, knowing it was too late to fix the past. Richard rarely spoke about their daughter. His pride kept him from admitting the mistake he had made. For him, asking for forgiveness or recognizing that he had failed as a father was unthinkable. But with each passing day, the regret became a constant presence, an invisible weight that pressed down on him just as much as his debts. As the crisis deepened, the social isolation of the family became more evident. Former business allies avoided Richard, fearing association with failure. Elizabeth, once a celebrated hostess at charity events and parties, now watched as the invitations dried up. The shine that had once surrounded them disappeared, replaced by an awkward silence. In a desperate attempt to salvage what little they had left, Richard sold the mansion, the place that had housed so many memories, and that symbolized the family's power, now stood empty. When the buyers signed the papers, Elizabeth cried for the first time in years. The mansion wasn't just a house. It was the symbol of the life they had built and the image they had so carefully maintained. Without the luxury that had once defined them, Richard and Elizabeth were left with little more than shame. They had lost everything they held dear: the money, the status, and perhaps most painfully, the daughter they had rejected. Their world had crumbled. The invitation arrived unexpectedly on an otherwise ordinary morning. Emily, now used to high-level engagements, received an email inviting her to be the keynote speaker at one of the largest aerospace engineering conferences in the United States. The event, gathering the most prominent names in the industry, would take place in the very city where she had grown up, where her parents still lived. The initial shock soon gave way to a mix of emotions. Emily knew this was an incredible opportunity for her career, but the thought of returning to the city where she had been rejected by her own parents stirred up a whirlwind of feelings. It was inevitable that she would run into people from her past, including her parents, Richard and Elizabeth. Nathan, who had always been by her side, sensed Emily's internal conflict as she reread the invitation for the third time. "Do you want to go?" he asked, approaching her with a gentle but understanding smile. Emily sighed, her eyes still fixed on the computer screen. "I do. Professionally, it's an amazing opportunity, but going back there, I'm not sure if I'm ready to face everything I left behind." Nathan took her hand, offering the same unwavering support he always had. "You've already proven to yourself and the world how capable you are. Going back isn't about what they think of you, but about what you've built through your own efforts. And I'll be right there with you, just like I've always been." With Nathan's encouragement, Emily made her decision. she would accept the invitation and return to the city, not just as a speaker, but as a transformed woman who had overcome the challenges imposed by those who had once rejected her. On the day of the event, the conference hall was packed. Journalists, engineers, entrepreneurs, and investors from the aerospace industry eagerly awaited the speech of Emily Thompson, the young woman who had become a pioneer in technological innovation. The lights focused on the stage as people murmured about her achievements and talent. Emily had become a public figure, frequently mentioned as one of the brightest minds of the new generation of engineers. Backstage, moments before stepping on stage, Emily took a deep breath. The decision to return to her hometown had brought old memories to the surface, but it also gave her a sense of liberation. She was no longer the young woman dependent on her parents' approval. Now, she was a strong, independent woman, recognized for her own merits. As Emily stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. Dressed impeccably, with a confident posture, she began to speak about her journey in engineering and the revolutionary projects she had been working on. The audience was captivated by the way she explained complex concepts with such clarity and passion. In the crowd, almost hidden in the back rows, were Richard and Elizabeth. They hadn't planned to attend the event, but after seeing Emily's name in the local papers as the keynote speaker, they couldn't resist the temptation to witness the success of the daughter they had rejected years ago. As Emily shared her story, emphasizing the importance of resilience and faith in her journey, Richard and Elizabeth couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and shame. Pride for how far their daughter had come, but shame for having doubted her and pushed her away. After the speech, Emily was surrounded by journalists and admirers, all eager for a word or photo with the brilliant engineer who had achieved so much in such a short time. However, her eyes scanned the room and, from afar, she saw her parents. Emily's heart raced. Time seemed to stand still for a moment. There they were, Richard and Elizabeth, visibly older, with expressions of regret and vulnerability. For a moment, Emily considered leaving through the back door, avoiding the confrontation altogether. But something stronger within her, perhaps the faith she had nurtured, compelled her to make a different decision. She needed to face the situation, but with maturity and an open heart for forgiveness. Nathan, noticing Emily's hesitation, whispered in her ear, "Do you want me to go with you?" Emily shook her head, taking a deep breath. "No, I need to do this alone, but stay close just in case," she said, offering a nervous smile. Emily walked toward her parents, and Richard was the first to speak, his voice strained by years of regret. "Emily, He couldn't finish the sentence. His throat tightened, and he looked at Elizabeth, whose eyes were also filled with tears. "We saw your speech. It was incredible," Elizabeth added, her voice trembling. "We're so proud of you." Emily stood in silence for a few seconds, absorbing the words she had once longed to hear. Now, they were no longer what she sought. Success wasn't about gaining their approval. She had discovered that her true value lay in who she was, not in what others thought of her. "I wasn't expecting you to come," Emily said, her tone calm but firm. "I built my life without needing your approval, but I've come to understand that all the challenges I've faced, all the difficulties, have made me who I am today. God used your choices to make me stronger." Elizabeth, now crying, took a step forward. "Emily, please forgive us for everything. We made a terrible mistake. We lost you, and in the end, we lost everything." Emily saw the sincerity in her mother's eyes. The remorse was evident, and her father, who rarely showed emotion, seemed equally broken by guilt. But instead of feeling satisfaction in seeing them like this, Emily only felt compassion. "I forgive you," Emily said softly. I don't hold any grudges. It wasn't easy, but I've come to realize that it was all part of God's plan for me. And in a way, even the pain you caused has turned into blessings." Reconciliation began to take shape in that simple yet profound moment. And for the first time in many years, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. Those few minutes standing with her parents seemed to carry the weight of years of pain and distance. But at the same time, they brought the promise of a long-awaited healing. The words, "I forgive you," echoed in the hearts of Richard and Elizabeth, hitting them like a wave of relief, yet also stirring deep regret. Elizabeth, already in tears, was quietly sobbing, while Richard, always so proud, lowered his head. The hardness he had carried throughout his life seemed to fade as Emily's words penetrated his heart. Richard began, but his voice failed him. He tried to gather himself, but couldn't find the right words to express what he felt. "Emily, I don't even know if we deserve forgiveness. We've hurt you so much, made so many mistakes." He finally looked up, his eyes full of guilt. "But we are deeply sorry. Losing you was the worst thing that could have happened to us. Everything we thought was important. It meant nothing when you were no longer in our lives." Emily remained composed, but her heart tightened as she saw her parents in such a state. The authoritarian, distant Richard from years ago now seemed like a broken man, fully aware of his failures. Elizabeth, who had always been so rigid and controlling, stood vulnerable, silently pleading for forgiveness with her eyes. "I know it wasn't easy for you," Emily said, her voice calm but filled with compassion. "But I want you to know that I forgive you, not because you asked for it, but because it's what I've learned along my journey. I realized that holding on to resentment would have only destroyed me. And I also came to understand that even in your wrong decisions, God was guiding my path. I needed to go through all of this to become who I am today." Richard and Elizabeth exchanged a look, astonished by the maturity and peace Emily displayed. They had always underestimated their daughter, believing she relied on the family's wealth and name to succeed. But standing before them was a woman whose strength and faith exceeded anything money could buy. "Your father and we've lost everything," Elizabeth confessed, her voice still trembling. "Our greed, our vanity, blinded us. We have nothing left. But what hurts the most is that in the process, we also lost you." Emily nodded, understanding the weight of that statement. It was a bitter lesson for her parents, but one they needed to learn. She knew the pain they carried wasn't just from the material loss, but from realizing they had lost something far more valuable, their relationship with their daughter. "We don't need to dwell on the past for long," Emily said softly. "It's behind us, and now we have the chance to move forward. I believe that God has a plan for everything, and even in the worst circumstances, He can turn evil into blessings. The truth is, without the choices you made, I wouldn't have become the person I am today." Elizabeth, still holding back tears, took a step forward and, with a hesitant motion, reached out to touch Emily's hand. "Do you still accept us in your life after everything?" Emily looked at her mother and felt a deep sense of compassion. The woman standing before her was no longer the cold, controlling person from the past. Elizabeth, like Richard, had been transformed by loss and regret. She couldn't change the past, but she had the power to choose the present and the future. "Yes, I accept you," Emily replied, taking her mother's hand. "There will always be room for forgiveness." Richard, who had remained silent, let out a heavy sigh before embracing Emily, a gesture he hadn't made in years. Emily could feel the pain and regret in her parents, but also the lightness that forgiveness brought. The reconciliation wouldn't erase the past, but it opened up a new possibility for the future. They stood there, in silence, for a few moments, just feeling each other's presence. For the first time in years, there was no resentment, only a new understanding and a path forward for healing. As Emily left the event that night, she felt lighter than she had ever been. She had not only forgiven her parents, but had also freed herself from the weight of years of resentment. The faith that had sustained her through the hardest moments now guided her toward a new beginning, where peace and reconciliation prevailed. In the days following that pivotal meeting with her parents, Emily found herself reflecting deeply on everything that had happened. The reconciliation with Richard and Elizabeth, something she never imagined possible, now felt natural. She felt at peace in a way she hadn't experienced since they had rejected her years ago. Nathan noticed the lightness in Emily's expression. Since the moment she had forgiven her parents, it seemed as if a huge burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She approached her work with renewed enthusiasm, but she had also begun to cherish moments of stillness and spiritual connection. Emily knew this journey wasn't just about professional success, but about an inner transformation, where her faith and resilience had been continuously tested and ultimately strengthened. One Saturday morning, as they strolled through the park, Nathan broke the gentle silence that surrounded them. "You seem different lately," he said, smiling as he observed her. "More at peace, more complete." Emily thought for a moment, gazing at the serene lake in front of them. She felt the cool breeze on her face and Nathan's hand intertwined with hers. He had always been able to sense her emotions before she expressed them. "I think I finally understand something God has been trying to show me all along," she replied, a calm smile on her lips. "It was hard to see it in the middle of the pain and rejection, but now I know everything was part of a bigger plan. Every challenge, every loss, every tear prepared me to be where I am today." Nathan looked at her with admiration. "You've always been strong, Emily, even when you didn't feel it. But your faith, your desire to see purpose in everything, that's what brought you here." Emily knew he was right. Had she not faced her parents' rejection, she might never have found the path that led to her success, and more importantly, the discovery of her own worth. Along the way, God had guided her steps, turning even the most painful circumstances into opportunities for growth. Not long after reconnecting with her parents, Emily received a message from Elizabeth asking to meet again. Unlike in the past, there was now humility and sincerity in her mother's words. Elizabeth's request had nothing to do with money or status, but with a genuine desire to get to know the daughter she had once pushed away. Emily accepted the invitation with an open heart. This time, the meeting was calm and without the explosive emotions of their previous encounters. Sitting at a simple cafe, mother and daughter talked like they hadn't in years. Elizabeth spoke about the mistakes she had made, how pride and greed had blinded her, causing her to lose sight of what truly mattered in life. She wanted to make up for lost time, and while she knew that wouldn't erase the past, she hoped to build a new relationship with Emily. "I see now how wrong we were, Emily," Elizabeth said, her voice filled with regret. "Everything we thought was important, money, status, power, none of it mattered once we lost you. We just wanted the best for you, but I realize now it was our pride that destroyed our family." Emily listened attentively, with a serenity that only forgiveness and faith could bring. She knew that reconciliation was a process, not something that would happen overnight. But seeing the change in her mother's heart, she felt they were on the right path. "The past can't be changed, Mom, Emily said softly. "But the future can. God has taught me that. He can take even the hardest situations and turn them into blessings. I believe everything that happened brought me to where I am now, and that's what gives me peace." From that day forward, things began to shift slowly. Emily reconnected with her parents, but in a new way, built on mutual respect and understanding. The bond wasn't the same as before, but there was a lightness, an openness to healing. In time, Richard also began to open up more, acknowledging the mistakes he had made. He let go of the pride that had defined him and began to appreciate family and the simple things in life. He and Elizabeth sold what remained of their fortune and started a new, more modest, but more authentic life. Meanwhile, Emily's career continued to flourish. Her aerospace engineering projects gained even more recognition, and she was nominated to lead a research team for one of the most important space projects of the decade. Despite her professional achievements, she never lost sight of what truly mattered: her faith, her family, and the greater purpose that God had planned for her. One night, during her evening prayer, Emily reflected on everything she had been through. The journey had been long, painful at times, but full of lessons that shaped her: rejection, the struggle for independence, forgiveness, and finally, peace. She knew that God had allowed everything to happen for a reason. The hardships had taught her to be strong, to trust in Him, and to understand that even the most difficult circumstances could be used for good. And now, as she looked toward the future, Emily knew that whatever the next challenge might be, she was ready. Because in the end, her true success wasn't in her professional accomplishments, but in the faith that had sustained her, and the certainty that she was living the purpose God had always had for her.